I know what you're thinking, right? Well, at least if you're a long-time viewer of the channel. Xevious? Again? Well, yes and no. I previously looked at a number of home conversions of the original arcade game, which showed some highs and some lows. But Xevious didn't really end with the 8-bit era, as when arcades made the jump into the third dimension, Xevious also joined them, and unsurprisingly, it too would make the journey home. This is Beyond The Scanlines, a series focusing on interesting games on classic computing and gaming platforms. Xevious 3DG made its way into arcades in 1996. Developed using Namco's System 11 hardware, it's no surprise it would make its way home, as the System 11 shared the core hardware of the PlayStation, just in a slightly upgraded form. Its big innovation was the move into 3D visuals, as it was the first game in the mainline series to do so. I say mainline, as of course the first actual game to do so was Savalu, a spin-off entry released several years prior, which, alongside introducing some neat flat-shaded 3D visuals, also made the action run from a first-person perspective. These home conversions to PlayStation would come out the following year, with the PAL version unsurprisingly being the last of the three in late 1997. You may just think it's a straight conversion of the Xevious 3DG arcade game, but the plus on the title gives it away, as alongside that, you also get conversions of the original arcade Xevious and its sort of sequel Super Xevious. Then finally, to wrap it out, you get Xevious Arrangement, a more modernised sequel which was originally released in 1995. When it comes to both Xevious and Super Xevious, I don't really have much to say here. As a pivotal shooter, what Xevious brought to the table on its launch in 1982 was outstanding. Ground and air targets, hidden bonuses you had to shoot, and more. Super Xevious, of course, is simply a remix of this original game, designed to be far more challenging with more intense attack waves for those players who'd mastered the original arcade game and were looking for something more. Which is no surprise, as Namco of course had their Namco Museum series of translations of their arcade games released on the PlayStation, and all of those are great as well. The one big difference is in the visuals, as both games default to an interlaced video mode, in order to accommodate the taller arcade game screen onto your standard TV screen. Yes, even on a PAL setup. Thankfully though, you can dive into the options and put the game into arcade mode, which works wonders as the game now switches out of the interlaced mode, resulting in much crisper visuals. Back then, rotating a heavy giant CRT may not have been the best of ideas, though in this modern era, it's far less a chore with a more modern television or monitor. I feel they're both great bonuses to include here, as even though neither of these games are the selling points of this pack, having them both present is really great from a historical angle. Really just to be able to see where the series has come from and how it's progressed over the years. Where things really start to get interesting is with Xevious Arrangement. This came out into arcades as part of Namco's Namco Classic Collection Volume 1 machine in 1995, and Xevious Arrangement offers what you would get if you dragged the mechanics of Xevious into the 16-bit era. The graphical upgrades are noticeable and appreciated, offering more details plus a wider colour palette compared to the hardware of the original machine. The sprite work takes advantage of this, featuring some great well-drawn enemy craft in comparison to the original game as well. Like both Xevious and Super Xevious, this version also runs in an interlaced mode by default, but its more detailed visuals do suffer in comparison when displayed this way. Tate mode is again on offer, and if you have the means to take advantage of it, then you absolutely should. The sound though, that's really where the biggest upgrade is presented. The infamously repetitive music of the original games have been overhauled significantly. Moving through the game, there are new pieces to listen to as you progress through each of the game's areas. One little touch I love is how the tracks blend between each other as you progress through the game. It's a nice way to make the mission progress feel that bit more seamless, especially compared to other shooters of the time. But for the core mechanics, and for the most part, it does play as you would expect. You take charge of the trusty Savalu fighter, you blast your way through a multitude of levels, and like the original game, there are both targets in the ground and in air to destroy. This time though, you can get power-ups for your primary shots. It allows you to fire them faster and do a little more damage, meaning they're incredibly handy for clearing out those air threats even faster. It's got to be said though, the upgrades on offer are nowhere near what you got with the likes of Xevious Faldrat Saga on the MSX, but it's quite a nice evolution from what you got in the original 1982 arcade game. Another great touch, and one I couldn't really show here, is that you can bring a friend in and enjoy some simultaneous two-player cooperative blasting action. Whilst the original game of course features that classic take-it-in-turns mechanic, now having a friend beside you fighting your way through evens up the odds a little more in your favour. And one of the things I love again is that it modernises the mechanics a bit more, but it still plays tribute to how the original game plays. Truthfully, I believe that Xevious Arrangement is the absolute best 2D take on Xevious out there. The addition of simultaneous two-player action and the upgrades to your shot abilities both bring it forward to what can be expected of a shooter in the 1990s, but also keep it feeling connected to the original game as well. But really enough of that, it's time to check out the main reason this pack exists, the conversion of Xevious 3DG. Besides moving everything into the third dimension, what else do you get here? The mechanics do play out mostly like the original game, though the first difference is in the camera, where instead of being positioned directly above as in the 2D games, he's now positioned above and behind the player, which really shows off the 3D visuals nicely. The camera also offers a few neat tricks when it comes to transitioning to new parts of the levels, where it can actually add a bit of tension and drama. I especially love the way it's done with the cavern tunnels in Area 3. Reaching up to an ending and having the camera swoop to show you turning down a new corridor is quite the neat touch visually. This also introduces a sense of depth into the levels, at least for the ground enemies, as they can now be positioned on tops of ridges or plateaus alongside the ground, which again helps the levels feel more three-dimensional, which is an especially unique characteristic compared to other shooters of this time period. Combined with the new level environments, it's a game which really deserves the graphic overhaul. Now, it's not the most detailed and textured game out there, and that of course is related to hardware limits of the PlayStation, but personally I'm a big fan of that mid-90s low polygon aesthetic, and the colours are vibrant and clear, which honestly is the most important part of the detail. Again, this runs using an interlaced video mode in order to keep things consistent with the higher resolution offered by the original arcade machine. This time though, Tate mode is not supported, as the original game was designed around a landscape aspect ratio. Thankfully, this doesn't detract from the visuals, as the minimally textured aesthetic doesn't really get lost amongst the interlacing artifacts. Another standout is the soundtrack. Again, like with Xevious Arrangement, this offers a whole unique take on the music, offering that mid-90s electronica vibe, which, as far as I'm concerned, is something I really enjoy here. It contrasts very nicely with the sound effects, which sound like they've been brought forward all the way from 1982 and really contrast well amongst that soothing electronic brilliance. Let's talk mechanics. They match the original games for the most part. You've got your ability to fire shots to take out air targets, but also bombs to take out the ground ones. And they're slightly enhanced here as now there's a bit of lock-on. Once you paint your targeting crosshair over a target, drop a bomb, it'll seek it out to a limited extent. Works out very nicely. But then you get the polar domes on the ground. Bombing these will release a power-up crystal which cycles between one of three colours. Blue ones upgrade your standard shots. This increases from the standard 2 forward shots to wider and wider angles as you progress through them. It works really well for clearing out aerial threats, as your upgraded shots now have a wider firing arc, meaning you don't need to be lined up directly to a target to take them out, once you've upgraded your shots. The green crystals, when collected, give you a focused laser beam. You lose the wide spread angle that your standard shots do, but they do more damage per shot, which could certainly make up for it. That's certainly the type of trade-off you'll need to make with them, as they can be very handy in other cases where you don't really need that wide angle of attack. Then you have the red crystals, and these ones really mix things up a lot, as these give you a heat-seeking laser for both air and ground targets. When fired, these will automatically seek out the nearest target and lock onto them, cycling to the next as it's destroyed. When you level it up, it'll mean that it can track more targets, and so it changes from being quite handy to being seriously effective, especially as it frees you up to focus on avoiding other enemies and their fire as a result. Where the original games offered plenty of action, as best highlighted with Xevious arrangement and its numerous areas, sadly Xevious 3DG only has 5 stages to beat. Now, it's one of those traditions which games of the 90s moved towards, having a fixed set of levels to beat, over playing endlessly until the game would eventually overwhelm you and wear you down. So in some ways, is it a bit backwards? Maybe, especially for a home release, but honestly, I don't really mind. Like any good shooter, you've got to learn your way through the waves, and some of them can be seriously tricky at points. It's interesting, I quite found it a good challenge as I sat down with it and playing it for this review, though that seemed to be odds against many reviews of the time from what I've read and hunted down. Then of course, you've got the desire to hunt down those secrets. It's not just about the towers as the original game offers, but plenty of other surprises as well, all of which are important, especially important if you want to be able to maximize those precious points. So the number of levels may be kind of low, though it's got to be said, they do run longer on average, so the balance shifts towards a more even split of tackling the level itself and taking on that end of level boss, instead of simply just clearing each stage, which all results in the levels playing for a much more suitable length of time. All up, what I love with both Xevious 3DG and Xevious arrangement is that both serve as two sides to the same coin, enhancing the mechanics of a well-loved arcade game. Xevious arrangement takes it towards how things would work in the 16-bit era, with plenty of levels, upgraded sprite work, and mechanics which extend upon those from the original game, but still keep the feel of it without going overboard with new additions. The result is a game which is certainly more engaging to those not used to early shooters or aren't fans of that 90s style bullet hell. It's certainly one I enjoyed quite a lot whilst I was recording footage. In a sad way, this is a bit of a lost gem, as it was only brought into the home via this compilation. Now of course, you could just fire the original up on main, though the feeling isn't quite the same as seeing it in action on an original cabinet. It just needs to be said that if you have a screen set up which lets you play the game in Tate mode, then absolutely do it, as you will lose visual quality when running in the default interlaced mode. This greatly contrasts with Xevious 3DG and its more modern visuals. Now I know for some, the low polygon thing tends to be rather dated, but for me, I feel it has a great sense of style, which, quite frankly, I'm sure is boosted by also running in that PlayStation's higher resolution interlaced mode. It offers something a little different from many other shooters of the time. It really is a great conversion of the arcade game, but then again, this should not be a surprise considering the closeness of the hardware. Depending on your screen setup, the interlaced visuals may be an issue, but generally, I certainly didn't find it to be the case. Mechanically, the same applies here. It doesn't go for all-out bullet hell, instead choosing to focus on simply expanding the core of the original Xevious mechanics, from the addition of differing weapon types, to the levels which offer more dynamic pathing and challenges that you'll encounter. It's still quite a shooter which gives you a good amount of challenge and is plenty engaging. You take those two great enhanced versions of classics and combine them with solid takes on the original Xevious and Super Xevious, and you've got quite a great collection here, especially if, like me, you like your old-fashioned kind of shooters, just as much as those more technically engaging ones. Though Tate mode is supported like with Xevious arrangement, and honestly is the better way to enjoy these two games as well, if you're not in a position to take advantage of it, you could still enjoy them just fine. Thankfully, the interlaced artifacts don't really affect the detail here. As far as I'm concerned, Xevious 3DG Plus is a great set of games for your classic shooting experience. Which brings me to the end of yet another Beyond the Scanlines. If you appreciated this look back at an interesting gem, why not leave a thumbs up on the video? Got some thoughts? Drop me a comment and let's chat. If you haven't already, do consider subscribing to the channel, and yes, ringing the bell to be notified the moment new videos are uploaded. Most importantly, thank you all so very much for watching.